or questions
Thank
you
you,
might
Mr.
have.
Chairman. So back to the facts. The unemployment rate, as Mr. Horowitz pointed out, in the height of the pandemic was 15.4%. As of last Friday, it was 3.4%. I think unemployment insurance worked. Let me give you another number with facts. $849 billion, $60 billion, we know it's an estimate, that's 7.1%. That is alleged to be fraud at the moment. We have members of the former U.S. Attorney's offices here. They know how long it takes to present these cases. So as professional as this testimony has been, and we're indeed grateful for it, I'm disappointed that we didn't hear from any of our hardworking people who relied upon unemployment insurance to keep their lives afloat. From that perspective, we know that state administrators and workers, they dealt with a 3,000% increase in UI claims. That paints a much more complicated picture. Let me read a note from Meredith, a Mom Rising member from Western Massachusetts. UI with the stimulus has saved our family. It's something we never imagined we'd need, but we both worked as administrators in education, one of us for study abroad companies and another finding ourselves out of work for no fault of our own but the pandemic and having a young daughter. We're extremely mindful of every penny, and we are worried about the coming months, not knowing when and if we'll secure jobs. But we want to pay our mortgages as we have, and our car payments, our food, and our medical care. Please understand, we live modestly, more than most people will ever know, and have always been responsible financially. Our home is small and one of the least expensive in our town. This is the first time in our lives that we ever could imagine the possibility of not being able to pay for basic expenses. It is profoundly stressful. For now, at least UI, with the stimulus, ensured that we were able to pay our mortgage, our car payments, our insurance, our food, and for essential family services. Mr. Turner, let me say how much I appreciate the work that you and your staff have done in trying to bring about criminal fraud rings to justice. Your work is putting criminals behind bars and returning the money they stole from the Treasury. Let me ask you about paying for the good work that you do. We provided immediate funding and support through the CARES Act and then ARPA, and I know that work is ongoing. You asked for $120 million from your office and received only $97 million in appropriation for fiscal 23. I'll ask you in a moment if that's correct. And last night, Joe Biden indicated that he intends to be assertive and aggressive with criminal referrals from the Justice Department. Certainly, the proposal that we've offered was then not what was agreed to in Congress in the final package. Mr. Turner, could you talk about the impact of your work and what members of this committee should be doing to support your goals?
Well, one of the things that we try to do with our work is to make sure that the funds that were going towards that program is actually being used and gets down to the correct recipient. So, for instance, the $888 billion that goes towards that program, our goal is always to make sure that we conduct audits, to make sure that it's getting there effectively and efficiently and in a timely way, and provide oversight, independent oversight by our investigators to ensure that they can deter any kind of fraud that may be taking place.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. And I know that based upon the Justice Department, what U.S. attorneys do, seldom does a would-be criminal or an individual who is suspect, if ever, walk into a U.S. attorney's office and say, hey, could you bring me up to date on what you're doing with me? That really doesn't happen, does it?
No, it takes a lot of hard work on the part of our investigators to actually go out and find the culprits.
And sophisticated criminal rings, they clearly try to outsmart the system regularly, so it takes the Justice Department and the good work that U.S. attorneys' offices do across the country considerable time in breaking down this criminal activity. Is that correct?
Yes. The more complex fraud is, the harder it is to capture. For instance, I think someone mentioned earlier about Money Muse. Money Muse is one of the more complicated schemes that are out there, and so it takes some time and some investigative work to get to the bottom of those investigations.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. June 2020, the unemployment rate, as Mr. Horowitz pointed out, was 15.4%. 20 million people had lost their jobs. The unemployment rate, as reported last Friday after the noting of all those jobs being created, is now 3.4%. Much of what we did really worked, and I take great professional and personal satisfaction from acknowledging there was no book on the shelf for what we were doing, and overwhelmingly, we got the American economy back on its feet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.